All right, so thank you to 500 Startups and the City of COVID for having me. I'm super excited to be here. Today, I'm going to be talking about Silicon Valley trends. In particular, when I was trying to figure out what exactly I wanted to talk about, I thought it might be really valuable to talk about fundraising and talent trends. So the reason I'm talking about fundraising and talent trends is because these are trends that have to do with startup ecosystems. So this is how founders raise money from investors, how founders hire their employees, and how they grow their teams. And when I look at Silicon Valley and the learnings that we can take from that ecosystem, I think fundraising and talent trends are the ones that are really relevant for ecosystems everywhere else. So a little bit about AngelList. AngelList is the world's largest marketplace for startup investing and hiring. A little bit of data on our fundraising product. We have invested, or investors have invested $410 million on our platform, and we're doing 80,000 matches every month between companies and candidates who are interested in working at those companies. The trends that I'm going to be talking about today are the rise of the early stage special purpose vehicle. What exactly that is, I will explain in a minute. That trend has played a really big role in the next two trends, which are the growing importance of the small limited partner and operator investors. And the last two trends are the rise of the talent marketplace and the rise of the student founder. So the rise of the early stage special purpose vehicle. A special purpose vehicle is an investment vehicle created for the purpose of investing in a single company. So historically, these have been used by investors for pro rata opportunities in some of their larger deals. In 2014, as an example, Angel, one of the most successful angel firms based in Silicon Valley, led a $200 million Pinterest Series F via an SPV. And when this news first came out, there were some questions, like how is it possible for Angel with like a $30, $40, $50 million fund to lead a $200 million round? And the answer is via a special purpose vehicle. So the way that worked is Angel went to the LPs, the investors in their fund. They went to some of their friends and said, hey, we have this opportunity for you to invest in this really exciting company that's doing really well. And that's how they were able to assemble a much larger investment via their SPV to lead this $200 million round. So the trend that we're seeing here is that more and more SPVs are being used for earlier stage deals as opposed to these later stage deals like Angel and Pinterest. So what are the key differences between funds and special purpose vehicles? The first is that a fund is typically used to invest in hundreds of companies, maybe even 500 companies, and an SPV is used for investing in a single company. The key difference here, though, comes in terms of decision making. So with a fund, the general partners, the people who are running that fund, have to make those decisions entirely themselves. With an SPV, what happens is the general partner says, I want to invest in this company, but I'm going to go to my LPs, my limited partners, the people who would typically invest in that investor's fund, and those LPs are going to play a role in that decision-making process. Funds are typically raised over several months, whereas an SPV can be raised over a matter of days or weeks. And the reason for that is the cycle to sell to someone, hey, I want you to invest in my fund, is much harder because what they're saying is I'm going to invest, you're going to invest in this vehicle, and that vehicle is going to exist for the next 5 or 10 years. Now with funds, on the flip side, the general partner is able to make a much faster decision because once they have that fund and they decide, hey, I want to invest in this company, they can do that immediately. With an SPV, if I, as a general partner, decide I want to invest in a company, I then have to go to my limited partners. I have to make sure that they want to invest in this company, and then I'm able to go back to the company and say, I'm going to make this investment. The last point here related to all of this is that as far as how much is invested, general partners are able to make this decision entirely themselves with a fund. And in an SPV, of course, the amount that is invested is very largely influenced by those limited partners. So at a high level, what are the big differences for LPs versus general partners? And the difference is that for LPs, they can make the decision to invest deal by deal. There's no 10-year lockup like there is with a fund, When an LP invests in a fund, that fund's going to be around for a while, like I mentioned earlier, and so they're tied to that for a much longer time. So if some of the nuances here are harder to understand, the key takeaway is that deal-by-deal investing is the big opportunity that you get with an SPV. And from a general partner's perspective, SPVs are great because they're easier to raise, it takes less effort, but on the other hand, there is uncertainty around capital, around how much money they're going to be able to raise. So who are the players behind SPVs? Of course, what's been the case for a while is that a venture capital firm will raise an SPV themselves, or a company will use an SPV themselves. But now there are a set of companies coming along that are really taking advantage of SPVs on their platforms. Seed, Invest, and WeFunder are two of these. They're online fundraising platforms. The way that they work is they source, the companies come to them and say, hey, we want you raising money on your platform. And these platforms have tons of investors on them that then decide whether or not they're going to invest in these deals with minimums of as low as $100. The way they make money is on a per transaction basis. As in, every time a company raises, they make some money. Funders Club is the world's first online venture capital firm. So they make money based on carry, which is a percent of the profits that their investments return. And the last player here is AngelList. That's where I work. An AngelList product works very differently from the others, and so I'm actually going to take a minute now to explain how that works. So at AngelList, we believe that every great investment starts with an angel. Before Sequoia Ventures invested in Google, Ron Conway did. Before Excel invested in Facebook, Peter Thiel did. This was the key insight that led us to start our Syndicates product in 2013. So the way Syndicates work is that, and Syndicates, by the way, are structured as SPVs. So the way that Syndicates work is that we have an investor like Tim Ferriss who decides he's going to invest $25,000 in SHIP. And SHIP is raising a much larger round. Now, $25,000 from Tim is valuable, as is his expertise. Tim is known to be a really value-added investor, but $25,000 is not a large percent of that entire round. So what Tim is able to do on AngelList is go to his backers, go to his syndicate backers, and say, I have this great opportunity to invest in SHIP. And then what happened when Tim did this round a couple of years ago is he was able to raise $722,000 from these everyday accredited investors. Now Tim gets an additional 15% of the profits from that investment, and Angel gets an additional 5%. So that's the AngelList business model. Leads so far, leads like Tim Ferriss have loved it. $410 million have been invested on Angels, like I mentioned earlier. That's from 210 active syndicates, and just recently we hit over 1,000 startups, and the average investment size is nearly $400,000. In the past year, in fact, we've already had a few billion-dollar exits from our later stage syndicates, and those include Cruise Automation, which I'll talk about a little bit later, Dollar Shave Club, and Twilio via its acquisition of Avi. So why are SPVs growing? The key takeaway, like I mentioned earlier, is that limited partners like that deal-by-deal flexibility. And these next 2 points are actually the trends that I want to talk about separately later on. Companies are able to more easily raise from large pools of small investors, and operator investors are now becoming empowered to become larger investors themselves. Key takeaway here from the rise of the early stage SPV that's happening in the US is that deal-by-deal investing is valuable for unlocking investment capital. The next trend that I'm going to be talking about is the rise of the small limited partner, the rise of the small investor. So what's happening with online investing is that you have large groups of small investors investing something like $1,000 each. On platforms like WeFunder, you invest even $100 each. And historically, large LPs have provided the vast majority of investment capital, something like millions of dollars instead of $1,000. But before I go into that a little bit more, I'm going to go to a separate case study of Lending Club. So most of what I'm going to be talking about today is, or in this trend, is equity, is online investing into startups. But with Lending Club, they're the world's largest peer-to-peer lending platform. How it works is customers apply for a loan, Lending Club determines the credit rating and interest rates associated with that loan, and investors on the platform select which loans they want to invest in. And typically, this is done by a bank. But what's happening with Lending Club now is this is now changing. Year over year, since 2012 all the way to 2015, Lending Club's loan volume was doubling every single year. And the interesting piece here is that this money is coming from a variety of sources. A lot of which, in fact, is coming from individuals. Not individuals directly, or individuals via managed funds or some sort of other investment vehicle. Lending Club, through June 2016, has almost 21 billion in loans have been financed, and in 2015 alone, 8 billion. So the key point here is that the U.S. consumer credit market is huge. The total size is $3 to $4 trillion. The addressable market for Lending Club, based on the requirements that they have for loans, is about $400 billion. So what Lending Club is doing is already playing a really big role in the consumer credit market. And in fact, this peer-to-peer lending concept is 72% larger per capita in the UK. This is certainly not just the US, it's happening all over the world. So the key takeaway here with Lending Club is that small investors in aggregate can take significant market share from large incumbents. And this is what we think can happen with small limited partners in startup fundraising. So key differences now between large limited partners and small LPs. Large ones, of course, invest millions of dollars. Smaller LPs invest on the order of hundreds or thousands of dollars. Larger LPs tend to be pension funds, university endowments, whereas small LPs can be almost anyone, in fact. Anything from your mid-level management in Silicon Valley or tech to consultants and bankers. Large LPs also tend to be investing at later stages, seed and above, whereas small LPs are a little bit more flexible. They're willing to invest even in pre-seed, sort of idea stage. And by the way, these differences are not rules. They're just sort of, on the whole, what tends to happen. And the key point for small investors is that very often they can be value add. And that's sort of a really important takeaway from the small investor perspective, is now for the first time, value-add investors don't need significant capital or their own deal flow to become investors in startups. As far as tracking, how are these platforms doing? These are sort of some high-level numbers. On Seed Invest, 130 investors have invested $50 million into 70 companies. Funders Club on Funders Club, 17,000 investors have invested $63 million in 200 companies. And on AngelList, 5,000 investors have invested $410 million into over 1,000 companies, like I mentioned earlier. One very important note is that these numbers, the investment volume, do include some institutional capital. So over time, all these platforms have also started to raise money from larger LPs as well. But in all these cases, the majority of capital is still coming from these smaller investors, like we saw with the Lending Club example. So what does this mean? What this means is the democratization of startup investing. SPVs have unlocked small investors as a fast-growing pool of capital. How did I make that jump from we have all these small SPVs we have all these small online investors to SPVs? Well, it's because SPVs are a really valuable tool in helping companies avoid large cap tables. So these are the representation of ownership of companies. So for various reasons that I won't go into, it tends to be not so great for companies to have really long cap tables. And so what an SPV can do is take these, say, 50 or 100 small investors and make them take up a single line on investors' cap tables. And that's turned out to be really valuable. So everything that I've talked about so far has had to do with accredited investors. These are investors that meet minimum net worth or income requirements. Now, recently in the US, there's been a big change to this. In May of this year, the Securities and Exchange Commission, that's an important US regulatory body, passed Title III equity crowdfunding. And what that means is now for the first time, anyone can invest in startups, not just investors who meet these certain minimums. Now, with this, and the reason that it took so long for the SEC, the regulatory group that I was talking about, the reason that it took so long for them to make this decision is because they've been worried about these lower income investors, like maybe they'll make worse decisions. And so with this law came a whole bunch of provisions to protect these lower income investors, including annual investment limits, company reporting requirements that are a significant burden on companies, and furthermore, these small investors can't invest via SPVs. So to be clear, this is just the more recent, this is just these recent non-accredited investors who this applies to. So it's sort of a work in progress, and it'll be interesting to see over the next couple of years how this law changes in the US and if there's going to be a shift in terms of what this regulatory burden is. But WeFunder is an example of a company that since this past May in the US has taken advantage of equity crowdfunding and has now posted 20 of the 28 crowdfunding investments that have happened since May. 8,000 investments totaling $5 million into 20 companies. And sort of the interesting piece here is that 76% of those investments came from investors investing less than $500. So that's pretty huge. 76% of those investments came from investors doing less than $500. The takeaway here is that, again, small investors can have a really big impact. Now, common response to this is, well, aren't you just taking the least knowledgeable investors and putting them with the worst companies? And yeah, it's legitimate concern. And the answer to this, as with sort of any product, any early space, is that there's growth that needs to happen. Investors can be protected by platforms in sort of their own ways, but they're ultimately responsible for the decisions, and over time, they'll start to make more educated decisions. As far as companies, why might there be adverse selection? Well, for sure, small investors might be a privacy risk. If I am raising from 50 smaller investors, as opposed to 3 or 4 really experienced investors, some of those small investors might be a privacy risk. Separately from that, fundraising online might be more work. There's sort of this concern that if fundraising online is more work, then does that just mean I'm going to have companies that can't raise via normal means, via not sort of online fundraising? And it's a legitimate fear. So AngelList's solution to this is our syndicate leads. So syndicate leads sort of are our way of saying, we know these deals are good because they're only coming from successful angel investors with a track record. And the various platforms have sort of their own ways of combating this question of adverse selection. At scale, of course, once you get past these fears, what does online investing mean? What does it mean to have small investors investing online? It means companies get better access to value and capital from their investors, and investors, on the other hand, get access to a new asset class with top deal flow, something that's been really, really hard historically. So it's a huge opportunity that's being uncovered here. 2 sort of quick testimonials from founders. Dan Roberts, the co-founder of a security company who raised nearly $1 million on Seed Invest, said that Seed Invest found us some incredibly valuable investors, including the ex-CEO of the second largest security company in the US. So this is an example of one of these platforms providing a ton of value to one of their companies. Paul Scanlon, the co-founder of a media company who raised $1 million on WeFunder, pointed out that having our fans involved and invested in us makes us more likely to succeed. So these are just 2 snippets of how small investors can end up making a really big difference. And the takeaway from all of this, of course, as I've been saying, is that there is a huge opportunity for small investors to provide significant capital and value. The next trend that I'm going to be talking about is the rise of the operator investor. So what is an operator investor? Operator investor, the term is sort of used in a bunch of different ways. The way that I'm going to be referring to it is investors who are currently investing part-time and have full-time operating roles somewhere else. So as a founder, as an executive somewhere, and what they're doing is they're investing in a few deals annually, just sort of deal flow as it comes along from their close networks, from alumni of companies that they've run. And professional investors work somewhat differently. They invest full-time, they may or may not have prior operational experience, and they're doing anything from 2 to 3 to dozens of deals annually. And they invest systematically, thinking about portfolio construction, how do we make sure we maximize our returns. So that's sort of the difference between professional investors and operator investors. So who are operator investors? Here are a few examples. I'm going to go through each of these. The first is Dave Morin. So Dave Morin started at Apple in 2004, working on product there, and he sort of had this early belief that operating systems should be social. At the time, MySpace was significantly larger than Facebook, orders of magnitude. Many of you may remember MySpace. It obviously did not do that well. But later on, Dave actually decided to go to Facebook and work on their platform there. So Dave was there for a few years and then left in 2010 to start his own company, Path, a much more intimate social network. But what happened in 2009 is Dave started investing himself. He sort of developed his expertise in social networks, platforms, product, mobile, and that made him a very, very valuable investor himself. Starting in 2011, in fact, while he was at Path, he started investing with a few of his friends from Facebook. And it only started as what they called an investment club, so certainly not an official investment firm. So now Dave is a founder and partner at Slow Ventures. They raised in 2015 a $65 million fund. But before that, the key point was that while Dave was at Path for 5 years, and while he was toward the end of his career at Facebook, he was an investor. He was investing while being an operator full-time, and he was investing in companies like Venmo, Hearsay Social, companies that, if they needed, could really take advantage of Dave's expertise in these areas that he knew really well because of the companies that he worked at. The next example is Elon Gill. Elon was at Google in 2004, where he launched a bunch of mobile products very early on. 2007, he started his own company, Mixer Labs, which was acquired by Twitter later on. And at Twitter, he led a whole bunch of efforts there. And what this gave him was a lot of expertise in scaling product, operations. Failed to mention, he also received his PhD in biology from MIT. So with this expertise, he was a really valuable investor himself. And this entire time, Elon was an investor while running these companies, and currently he's the co-founder of Genomics. Matt Mullenweg, many of you may know as the creator of WordPress. He's now the founder and CEO of Automatic. He's been there since it started in 2003, and that has given him an expertise in open source, distributed teams, content management, and that's where he's had a really significant role. He's made 35 investments since 2008, including MakerBot, which is a hardware company, and in the beginning, they were experimenting with open source. And so that is an area where Matt was able to be really valuable. The last example for operator investors is an interesting one. It's what Flight Ventures, a VC firm, is doing on AngelList. So what Gil Pinchina, Sean Narang, and Alex, the team at Flight Ventures, what they're doing is they're creating a network of a lot of different value-added partners, many of whom are currently operators. It includes, for example, Nathan Creswell. So he is one of the co-managers of a syndicate on AngelList, and he has his expertise in software as a service. So what he's doing is co-managing the syndicate that's investing in software as a service startups. Nick Sullivan, the CEO of ChangeTip, a Bitcoin payments company, is a co-manager of the Bitcoin syndicate on AngelList. What's happening is we have these value-add operators who are not full-time investors who are able to add a lot of value to the companies that they invest in. Zach Polius, another one of the partners at Flight Ventures, sort of summarizes this really well. AngelList has become a place where value-added investors who don't have access to capital and aren't full-time venture capitalists can access capital and enable investors who are outside Silicon Valley to join these high-quality deals. To sum it up, successful entrepreneurs have operational expertise and high-quality networks of founders. With the right resources, these successful entrepreneurs can themselves become key investors, even as they're operating. The fourth trend that I'm going to be talking about is the rise of the student founder. Many of you are familiar with these stories. Mark Zuckerberg started Facebook at Harvard, Evan Spiegel started Snapchat at Stanford, Matt Mullenweg, WordPress at Harvard, Birchbox, Warby Parker, Reddit. There are tons of these stories of companies being founded while there are students. Why students? It's not clear why students can become founders themselves while they're in school. Shouldn't they be busy studying for their exams, socializing? Well, it turns out that students are actually studying the cutting edge and thinking big. They're in environments surrounded by tons of classmates who are also thinking big. Two examples. VidRover is a company that is indexing videos on the web using computer vision. So if, for example, you see a video, or as a side note, like Google does this, right? So when you Google social network, Google knows the first result you should get is Facebook. But it's not clear how it'll know that like a puppy video is a video of puppies. The way that I know that is because when I post this video, like I tag it with like cute puppies. But how do I do that automatically if it's not clear? And so VidRover is working on this problem, and it's founded by two Columbia PhDs. Immunicon is another company training the body's immune system to fight cancer and other deadly diseases. Believe it or not, it's founded by a Dartmouth molecular biology undergrad. This is the opportunity that you get from being a student founder. You're studying what's challenging, you're studying what's new, and this allows you to think big. Ray Wang is the director of Dorm Room Fund, which is a student-run VC, and she had a very interesting insight on this, which is that if you think of dropping out of school as being a precursor to starting a company, that makes starting a company very limited to a small set of students who have the safety net. In other words, if I can't afford to drop out of school, I'm not going to start a company. That's sort of an old-time mindset. The shift that's happening is that schools and various programs are starting to support student founders. Sequoia, KBCB, these are two firms that have started their own student ambassador programs. Alsop Louis Partners hired a partner who was a sophomore at Stanford. Various firms are starting their own summer programs. Various schools are starting their own funds for investing specifically into companies founded by current students and alumni. The House Fund from the University of California, Berkeley. A bunch more of these are in progress as well. Schools as well are thinking about this in a more analytical way. So at Princeton University, they launched the Princeton Entrepreneurship Council, which is designed to figure out how do we facilitate entrepreneurship at our schools. And so, again, the shift that's happening here is instead of dropping out, let me figure out how I can stay in school and have the school support me as I'm starting my company. Now, related to this, there's actually an interesting shift that's happening, which is, well, students can be venture capitalists themselves, which when it started was a wildly crazy idea. Dorm Room Fund was the first, started in 2012. Rough Draft came just right after, and I believe 500 Rookies is a newer program as well. And so what's happening is that students are now making investment decisions themselves. They're backed by larger VCs. Students get to invest in other students. And in the case of Dorm Room Fund, the carry, in other words, the profit that those funds make, goes back into the ecosystem by going to the schools that those partners represent. So the Dorm Room Fund New York branch, what their carry that they end up receiving one day will end up going to schools like Columbia and New York University and Princeton to facilitate the entrepreneurship programs at those schools. Have they been doing? Well, they've actually invested in quite a lot of companies. Rough Draft has invested in over 50 companies. Dorm Room Fund has invested in over 100 companies. And they've invested into some very successful companies. and hundreds of millions in follow-on. What is the takeaway here? The takeaway is that student founders live in a creative environment that nurtures innovation, and students can also, therefore, make a huge, huge impact. The last trend that I'm going to be talking about is the rise of the talent marketplace. So the talent marketplace is one of many different categories of companies that play a role in the recruiting space. Now, the reason that I want to talk about talent is because if you think about what the role of a founder is, the founders have to do two things really well in particular. Number one, they have to raise money. That's what all the other stuff has been about so far. But the other thing that founders have to do really well is hire. One's team is incredibly important for early stage companies. And so, as both a founder or as an investor, it's really important to think about an ecosystem in terms of how can we have companies grow? What can we do to make companies, to get the best people into companies? So the talent ecosystem, again, there are tons of different categories within this space. There are job boards, there are ways of searching candidates, recruiters on demand. This is a way for companies to say, I need help with recruiting, get me a recruiter right now. Applicant tracking systems, where is the candidate in my pipeline? But the most important one that I want to talk about today is the talent marketplace. The way that recruiting has typically worked is that recruiters source candidates via LinkedIn, for example. They evaluate those candidates to some minimum bar, and then they track those candidates in the recruiting pipeline. What's happening with talent marketplaces is that these responsibilities are being outsourced or productized. So effectively what they are recruiting firms at scale. Candidates on talent marketplaces sign up, they fill out their profiles, companies then indicate interest in candidates, and the way that these platforms succeed is by monetizing successful placements into companies. A bunch of examples. Hired, founded in 2012, perhaps the most well-known example right now, has over 2,000 clients, including Forbes, Groupon, and TransferWise. Indeed, which has been around for many, many years, launched their sort of premium service, their premium marketplace service, launched Indeed Prime just last year, and their clients now include Facebook, Uber, and Dropbox. AngelList launched our own version of this earlier this year, and our clients include Pokemon Go, Bloomberg, and Postmates. And an interesting example internationally is Angela. So Angela is actually from San Francisco. They're based in Silicon Valley, New York. But what they're doing is they're finding the best talent in Africa. They're equipping them with the skills, the knowledge that they need to succeed, and then finding them companies to work at all over the world in the US. And these companies have been paying for this remote work to be done from these engineers in Africa. I think we'll start to see a lot more companies like this as time goes on. So talent marketplaces, why do companies use them? It's cheaper per hire, placement times, it can be much faster to place candidates. You might get higher quality candidates, and for candidates, you're spending less time job hunting because you're seeing all of your options all at once, and you're seeing more companies and more offers at the end of the day. This sort of leads to a question of what's driving demand. Why, a lot of this seems somewhat obvious, like why couldn't this happen 5 or 10 years ago? Well, a few things have changed to make this possible. And an important one is LinkedIn's role in all of this. So LinkedIn popularized online professional profiles, which is huge. What used to be the norm, a candidate going around handing out their resume, is no longer the norm. What's becoming more popular is for that resume to live online permanently. And that's a huge piece of this talent marketplace, is candidates being willing to give up their information to many, many companies all at once. And the second piece is that recruiting practices tend to just be very deeply ingrained. So even if this shift could have started 5 or 10 years ago, it's just a slow-moving shift because companies tend to do things a very certain way with respect to their recruiting. Another way of looking at it is that hiring can be a really big bottleneck for fast-growing companies, and as we start to get more of these fast-growing companies that need to hire very aggressively, they think really hard about how can we recruit faster. Startups don't want to miss great candidates. As a result of all of this, there's even more competition. And so talent marketplaces are just one of the many ways that companies are trying to figure out how do I get the best talent. Takeaway here is that talent marketplaces can help companies and candidates move faster and make better decisions. So to recap these takeaways, deal-by-deal investing is really valuable for unlocking investment capital. There is a huge opportunity for small investors to provide significant capital and value. Successful entrepreneurs have operational expertise and high-quality networks of founders, and with the right resources, these successful entrepreneurs can themselves become key investors. Student founders live in a creative environment that nurtures innovation and can make a huge impact. And talent marketplaces can help companies and candidates move faster and make better decisions. Now, before moving on, I'm going to talk about a few global sector trends really quick. A lot of the stuff was focused on fundraising. Everything so far was focused on fundraising and talent. Just to get a quick pulse on a bunch of different sectors around the world, I'm going to start with one sector that's cooling down a bit. And that space is food delivery. So food delivery has a bunch of different segments. In grocery delivery, there are companies like Instacart, Door-to-Door Organics. Amazon made a move into this space with Amazon Fresh. Meal delivery, Caviar, Postmates, DoorDash, Uber Eats, of course, stomped into the space quite recently and has made a ton of impact. And then meal kit delivery, Blue Apron, HelloFresh, Plated. There are tons and tons of these companies, and the space has become very crowded, at least globally, generally. That's not to say this is the case in every country, but in certain countries it has been. We're starting to see a lot of these companies. So CD Insights has some really great data on this. What we're seeing so far in 2016 is a big drop in food delivery investments. This data for 2016 goes through May, so even if you extrapolate out through the end of 2016, you're still looking at something like $1.8 billion in global investments into meal and grocery delivery companies, which is less even than the 2014 number. Another interesting way of looking at these numbers is what percent of this funding is going into early stage funding, or early stage companies. Well, that number has actually dropped dramatically in recent years, in this past year. So over the past few years, the percent of meal and grocery delivery investing that was going into angel or Series A or seed rounds was something like 40 to 60%. This past year so far, that seed to angel number is at 14%, which is a huge drop. Basically what's happening is that investors are starting to see fewer of these food delivery startups because they recognize how challenging that space is. A few of these shutdowns, Spoon Rocket was in the US. They struggled for a bit and ended up integrating into iFood in Brazil. Ola, the Uber competitor in India, had Ola Cafe and Ola Store for their food and grocery deliveries, for their meals, and grocery deliveries. And they both shut down, and Ola shut those branches down earlier this year. Peppertop, another India-based startup, shut down earlier this year because they realized how hard logistically it is to operate in grocery delivery. And I just want to point out, this doesn't mean this is really hard to do everywhere. It's not it's hard to do globally. Just in certain countries, we're starting to see a lot more of these food delivery companies. But I want to end on a happier note. So I'm going to end with a few sectors that are on the rise that seem to be doing really well. And the first one is artificial intelligence in healthcare. Over the last 2 years, we've been starting to see a lot more deals. That spike, by the way, in the fourth quarter of 2014 comes from 2 deals. But if you take those out, there's been in the last quarter of 2015 and the first quarter of 2016, both of those quarters set new records for both the number of deals done and fundraising. But again, only if you take out that important outlier in late 2014. In 2015, 60 deals were done for healthcare artificial intelligence companies, and already in the first quarter of 2016, there have been 30 deals. But what exactly does the healthcare AI market look like? There are tons of different categories. These are some of them. Genomics, studying and analyzing genes. What deep genomics is doing is they're able to figure out if I modify the DNA in a given cell, how is that going to affect the future? How is that cell going to be affected? AI Cure is using computer vision to figure out if patients are actually taking their medicine like they're supposed to. Bay Labs is also using computer vision to figure out if the results of an ultrasound are positive or negative. Medical imaging technology is super advanced, but you don't always have the right doctors all over the world to read that medical imaging. And so Bay Labs is really who has been working on that problem. And then Atomwise is working on drug discovery. So I thought I'd dig into Atomwise a little bit. What Atomwise is doing is finding cures faster via algorithmic drug discovery and evaluation. So why is this important? It's important because the process of discovering a drug in the US and globally really is an extreme challenge. In the US, it can take 10 to 15 years, over $2 billion to discover a new drug. And so Atomwise has developed this technology, AtomNet, that has been dramatically improving this process. And they raised a $6 million Series A in 2015, led by a bunch of very successful science investors. Second space that I want to talk about that's doing well is automotive technology. In 2015, $556 million went into automotive tech companies, and in the first half of 2016, that number has already hit $467 million. A few exits. Lytx, which is a telematics and fleet optimization company, was acquired by a private equity firm for $500 million. And Cruise Automation was acquired by GM for $1 billion. So when people think of the automotive technology market, they see it as very often self-driving technology. But there's actually a lot more happening in the auto tech market. For example, vehicle-to-vehicle communication. Cars can talk to each other and as a result of that, use less fuel. They can keep their drivers safe. Separately from that, there's security companies. As cars go online, as they become cloud-enabled, there start to become some risks. Like, I don't want a hacker to take over the destination of my car or put me into an accident. And then there's telematics and fleet optimization, which I'll explain with ZenDrive. So what ZenDrive is doing is using mobile data to measure driver behavior. And what they can do is, given a fleet of many vehicles, so for example, a group of waste management trucks, the fleet manager can look at all of their drivers and see how are my drivers doing. So do they tend to break the speed limit? Are they going too fast? Are they accelerating too quickly? And so these actionable insights can result in safety and fuel efficiency improvements for drivers. ZenDrive, in collaboration with BMW, developed an algorithm for automatic collision detection. A sort of response to ZenDrive in general was, well, is this data as accurate as onboard diagnostics? So cars collect this data, but can a phone be that good? Well, they actually did a study and proved that yes, phones can be as good at collecting this data. And ZenDrive raised a $13.5 million Series A, led by Sherpa Capital earlier this year. Tigon Bernstein, who's an investor in Cruise Automation and an investor on AngelList, had a really interesting insight here, which is that with a company like Cruise, worst case scenario, especially for a seed round, is you're going to 5x your money because there are so many acquirers. Now, while this is not a guarantee, the key insight here is that companies like BMW, General Motors, have a lot of money that they spend on research. And so investing in startups with great teams is a really great way for them to find the best technology as a part of that budget for them to grow and have the most cutting-edge technology. The last space that I want to talk about is real estate. and the role that tech is now playing in that space. So in 2014, $1.1 billion went into 174 deals globally. 2015, $1.9 billion into 212 deals globally. And in the first half of 2016, already $1.8 billion into 108 deals. Important note, actually, there's one giant deal in there, $900 million investment into Homa, which definitely skews that number a bit. But the important note here is that the space is growing. Brendan Wallace is an investor in real estate companies, and sort of one of his key, it's like a very key thesis for him. And his background is very heavily in real estate. He spent 5 years doing real estate at Blackstone and at Goldman Sachs. And his key idea, his sort of observation, is that the US real estate market is massive. It's 13% of the US GDP, it's a $40 trillion asset class, but it's one of the lowest spenders on IT. And so his view is that there is a lot of room to improve to make real estate tech a more efficient space. So what exactly does real estate tech look like? Well, it breaks down into both residential and commercial real estate. There are marketplaces, there's crowdfunding, which is now being applied to many, many different spaces. The mortgage process is still very slow, it's very inefficient. So Blend is working on making the mortgage process better and faster. And virtual viewing. I want to be able to see this property before I've actually built it. So Opendoor is one of these companies. What they're doing is making buying and selling homes a much, much better experience. So sellers have this really difficult problem of when they're ready to sell their home, they have all these things they need to work on at their house or on their home, but they don't have the money to do it. Their house might sit on the market for many, many months, and this is a really, really big problem for homeowners. So what Opendoor is doing is giving sellers an immediate offer, and they're going to handle everything else as well. They'll handle the inspection, they'll renovate the home in the way that's necessary to make it sellable, and it's huge. For sellers, it's a really valuable, really valuable tool for them. For buyers, they have their own problems. Buying a home is not always the most transparent process. What if you buy the wrong home? You find something that's not actually a great fit for you. So Opendoor is making buying a home a much more transparent process as well. And Opendoor raised an $80 million Series C in October 2015, and they raised $100 million today. All right, that's about it. Please, if you have any questions, you can email me at rishi@angel.co, or we have time for a couple questions right now. Thank you.